If you have ever looked into getting mental health support in the UK, you have probably heard the exact same advice. The NHS is free, so you should just wait. Or private therapy is faster, so you should just pay the 80 quid a session. But that surface-level comparison completely ignores what actually happens to your time, your well-being, and your wallet as the weeks drag on. The problem with looking at a price tag on day one is that it ignores the compounding reality of a 6 to 12-month timeline. You aren't buying a single hour of time, you are committing to a process. This diagram shows the standard starting assumptions, NHS at £0 and private at 80. Both routes exact a distinct toll. The NHS charges you in waiting weeks and limited sessions, while the private sector charges in assessments, cancellations, and open-ended commitments. Relying on those headline numbers is exactly how households quietly overspend by anywhere from £400 to £1,200 over a single 6-month course of treatment. To make a choice you can actually afford, you have to map out the likely total cost, including the hidden administrative fees, before you book your very first appointment. You have to treat therapy like a significant household capital expense. If you treat it like an open-ended monthly subscription, you are virtually guaranteed to blow your budget. Let's evaluate NHS talking therapies first. The primary appeal is straightforward. You can self-refer in most areas, and the treatment itself is entirely free at the point of use. This timeline illustrates what you actually get. You start out at your assessment. But in busier regions, the gap between that assessment and your first proper therapy session often stretches out to 12 or 16 weeks. And what you receive at the end is usually a small, time-limited package of 6 to 12 sessions. If your specific difficulty requires 20 sessions of work and the NHS only offers you 8, you haven't finished treatment. You have only finished the package. And waiting on a list carries a real financial burden. Your symptoms don't pause. That wait shows up in lost productivity at work, the occasional sick day, and the money you spend on short-term coping tools or self-help apps. This chart shows how those unseen expenses add up. The headline cost stays at 0, but for an average household, the hidden cost of a long wait totals roughly £150 to £400. Some people try to manage this by buying private bridging sessions while they wait. That is a completely valid choice, but it means you are no longer comparing a free NHS route to a paid private one. You are now running a hybrid model. The NHS route is rarely mathematically free. It usually just transfers the cost out of your wallet and directly onto your time and your working capacity. The private route solves the access problem. You get immediate help, usually within days, and you can pick a therapist who specializes in the exact modality you need. But let's look at the baseline math. If you book an experienced therapist at an average of £75 a session and your concern requires 20 sessions, you are immediately looking at a £1,500 commitment. This graph shows the danger of open-ended therapy. Without a clear contract on goals or built-in review points, sessions roll on for months. We call this the drift, and it drains budgets incredibly fast. Then come the hidden administrative fees. You might pay a premium rate just for the initial assessment. And if your work schedule is unpredictable, a strict 48-hour cancellation policy means you will pay full price for sessions you never attend. There are other secondary fees that catch people off guard too. Things like paying for letters requested by your HR department, or charges for messaging your therapist between sessions.
Here is how a real budget breaks down. You plan for 12 weeks at £60, expecting a £720 bill, but add an assessment fee, 2 cancellations due to a work trip, and 1 workplace report, and your total hits over £1,000. That is a 40% overshoot. It is very easy to feel buried under a stack of unchecked hidden administrative fees when you only planned for an hourly rate. Ultimately, the greatest financial risk in private therapy isn't the hourly fee. It is the lack of a planned finish line and the penalties buried in the cancellation policy. Before you even choose between NHS and private care, you need to address the most common financial errors households make right out of the gate. The first error is comparing totally incompatible products. Weighing a short-term NHS CBT package for panic attacks against open-ended private psychodynamic therapy for childhood trauma is useless. They treat different things over different timescales. Decide what you actually need first. The second mistake, and the single largest financial blind spot for salaried workers, is the Employee Assistance Program. This flowchart maps out a step everyone should take. Many UK employers provide 4 to 8 free counseling sessions a year as a standard benefit, and they routinely go entirely unused. If you start paying out of pocket without checking your HR portal first, you are leaving between £300 and £600 of direct, usable value on the table. Another expensive mistake is defaulting to weekly sessions. For many situations, a fortnightly cadence works just as well and instantly halves your monthly cash flow burden. Ignoring your corporate benefits and failing to ask about therapy intensity options guarantees you will pay an unnecessary premium, regardless of which provider you select. To make a choice you can sustain, you need to model your total costs over a 6-month window, rather than just looking at a per-session price. First, find the realistic local NHS wait time for your specific region. Do not use the national average. Check your local Talking Therapies website, because wait times vary wildly by postcode. Second, factor in the exact credential level you need privately. Prices scale sharply depending on whether you are booking a newly qualified counselor or a specialized clinical psychologist in London. Third, explicitly add a £75 to £150 line item to your budget specifically for a final closing review session. Plan for the end at the beginning. Taking control of the data using a cost calculator framework takes about 10 minutes, giving you a clear picture of your actual financial exposure. Once you run the numbers, the optimal path usually becomes clear. The NHS route makes sense when your symptoms are mild and stable, and tight cash flow means adding several £100s to your monthly outgoings just isn't viable. This quadrant maps the trade-offs. Private therapy clearly wins out when you have acute needs, a complex history, or you require immediate intervention to protect your employment or relationships. And remember, one route does not cancel the other. You can remain on an NHS waiting list while utilizing private bridging sessions in the meantime. If you are worried about insurance implications, private therapy does not automatically enter your NHS record unless you explicitly request it to be shared. Use a cost calculator to map your specific household inputs. Stop comparing incomplete metrics and start working with your actual local data. The ultimate goal here isn't to find the absolute cheapest option on paper. It is to identify the plan you can financially sustain through to completion. Because half-finished therapy is the most expensive mistake you can make.